thanks, Gaz, for taking the time out to chat. And even if we just have a bit of your backstory, and I know that you yourself had issues with drug and alcohol abuse. So maybe even if we can go back to that place and just go through that. I mean, where did it all begin?
I suppose we go back, as we always do, we go back to the younger self. And I was always a really anxious child. I was always a little bit highly strung, with the way that we grew up and maybe the way we were parented, I'm not sure. But there was always that anxiety in me. And then school happened and I was bullied at school. In secondary school, not so much in that primary age, but in secondary school it was quite bad. And then I was taken out of the school that I was in because of that, and then placed in another school. And I think that's not the reason I went on. I think it had a real lasting effect on all of that development and issues and confidence and self-esteem and all that sort of stuff. And it all snowballed. So as a coping mechanism back then, I drank or I used drugs from a quite young age. I was drinking from quite a young age too, because I always found myself getting access to it. I would have collected glasses and bars and things like that.
What age would you have been?
My first job collecting glasses, I was 14, and that was locally. And I remember, whenever you should be in your bed getting ready to go to school the next morning, I was coming home from collecting glasses in a nightclub with 2 bottles of beer and a packet of cigarettes, and that was a sort of relationship then that continued. But I was always a problematic drinker. I was always, and even whenever I was using drugs, I was always excessive. I was always the one that was in trouble because of it, or passing out, or and it was that was the teenage years for me. I would go to school and I would get in trouble, almost the opposite of what I would have been before, as a protection mechanism, I think. Almost to the point where they wouldn't let me come back after GCSEs. And then at home, I was like a completely different person. And that's how that's how I learned to cope with everything, And then I grew up. I went on to university in Scotland. So I moved to Aberdeen, 2000. No parents, no ties, nobody to answer to. And I think the genie just came out of the bottle at that stage. The drugs got a lot harder. I started working as a doorman. I started to try to be the person, that I felt I needed to be to protect myself whenever I was there. And I became extremely functional. I was smoking heroin in Scotland. Drinking was always a massive problem for me. And yet was still able to get a business degree and a master's. So I did human resource management. So I finished all that and moved back to Dublin, worked for Dunn's as an HR manager, still with an alcohol problem. And then I got married, we moved down south, bought a pharmacy, and it just escalated to the point of destruction. Now, that was a 15-year journey. And then I came back home, literally with 2 black bags of clothes, and had to restart from scratch, and it was tough, and that was 2009. We're now a lot further down the road, and I've managed to pull it all back and do a lot of the work that was involved in recovery, but it hasn't been easy.
So what was the turning point for you, do you think?
I used to have a turning point every Monday. Do you know what? I thought I had many. I thought the breakdown of the first marriage was the turning point, and went into treatment the first time, and it wasn't, obviously, and it didn't work at that time. And then I remember I was taken off a landmark in Derry. Just, it wasn't in a good place, and I was taken out, and I was in the hospital, and even then, it still wasn't enough. I broke my back in a car accident, and I was in a brace, and that wasn't enough. But when I got sober, the second time I went into the treatment, I actually was sober for a bit, and then I relapsed on and off for 2 years. And in that cycle and in that process of change, the last time I relapsed, obviously, and I haven't drank since, was the worst, emotionally and physically sick that I think I've ever been. And that was the turning point was, I know that I can drink anytime I can use drugs anytime I want, but I don't want to because I now know what happens when that happens. So it was a mindset change between being told I can't do it to understand that I don't want to do it.
So it was a decision. I can kind of identify with that because I know whenever I was smoking, I know it's there was that change for me psychologically that I used to think of them as a friend and comfort and everything else, and that my mind shifted to no, they are the enemy. And so I got to the stage where I knew that I didn't want them. And with that mindset change, I think that made the difference for me as well. So I can completely understand that.
And it's like you were saying, like you become so reliant on these things. I nurtured that relationship for so long. And when I work with people, I try to whittle it down to, instead of let's look at addiction or let's look at you're coming here and as an addiction, let's look at it as a relationship. You've created this, which people do. And if people can relate to a relationship a lot easier than they can relate to somebody telling them that they're addicted or physically dependent. And it's a really complicated thing. It's behavior change. It's, the chemical side of it. You do have the physical dependence, the psychological dependence. So, and I think that's why addiction's so tricky, because it's very complex and we're not all the same.
Absolutely. We are just so individual. I mean, back, when you think back into your teenage years, and as a guy, was there anybody that you could talk to? I mean, or did you feel you had to be tough? And
yeah, I think the bullying thing had a detrimental impact on what I perceived I had to be like.
Yes.
So my perception was I needed to be cool and respected, or the older guys. So I would have went to the bar on my own and sat and smoked cigars. I was 16 or 17, because I felt that would create an image of something. And I grew up in a household, and I love my father to bits, but and my mother, but we didn't really talk about feelings or emotions. It just wasn't done, and that was no one's fault. It was just how we were at the time.
Yeah.
And the first time I think I ever opened up, I was 17, and I was a manager at the time, and he was the first person that I told that I thought I had a problem with alcohol at that time, but wasn't enough. I don't think I had the maturity enough to figure out what needed to be done at that stage. Whenever I started abusing drugs and alcohol at such a young age, in the adolescence, the emotional maturity had never really developed properly. I never learned the things that I needed to learn at that age. So you're almost playing catch up. And I always, again, when I'm talking to people, people use drugs or alcohol or substances. Let's just say substance. People use substances in general for four main reasons. One is to feel good, to feel better, to do better, or because the people around them are doing it. And the problem with that is because they're so quick to do what they do. So if you want to feel better, drugs and alcohol will do that very quickly. So what happens is you use the drugs and the alcohol to, if you're feeling depressed, to feel better, or if you're feeling down, to feel better. But what happens is you become reliant on that, and then the same four things are required then to stop it, because you get to a point where you need to feel better because you've used for so long. You feel bad. You can't do well because you can't function. So the same four things are required. So there's a full circle.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not intentional. I don't think I have never met anybody that's decided it'll be great to have a drink first thing in the morning just to function. I haven't met that person yet.
Just so you can let people know what it is that you actually do now. So what are you doing now in your work and even in your private practice?
So I'm employed by the Western Trust as an addiction nurse therapist. I'm qualified now 4.5, nearly 5 years. I went back and retrained, and I worked in the crisis mental health service and inpatient setting for 3.5 of those. So that's technically my day job, which I love. I love working with people, especially working with people with substance misuse problems. That was always where I wanted to be. But then outside of that, I have recently, just over a year ago, set up a non-profit CIC company working with people in recovery from addiction through sport and exercise. So basically, I take people in, put them through a 6-week program initially with recovery content and exercise, and use that as a medium then for helping them maintain and sustain long-term recovery. We actually have in terms of alcohol, we actually, if you really look at the findings, the most sober young generation that we've had now in quite some time. So people are now choosing not to drink as much, which is great. But the nature of the drugs has changed.
Yes.
So it's a lot of prescription medication. So it's a lot of your benzodiazepines, your diazepam, your Xanax, and your opiates now, your oxynorm, your OxyContin, Subutex, heroin, even neuroleptic pain relief, anti-epileptic drugs. People are taking and buying everything and anything, and because it's prescription drugs, we're seeing a lot of deaths because of the result of that, because it's a very dangerous thing to get mixed up in. And I think our culture, because of the troubles, for example, doctors medicated through the diazepam. Everybody had diazepam in the cupboard, and if you didn't, your neighbour did, or someone down the street did, to the point where we're now dealing with benzodiazepine dependence. And that's a really slow withdrawal process. It's like a 2 milligram withdrawal per week. So if you think if you're on 40 and you have to come down to 0, it's a long time. We're using alternative solutions now, which is good. We're using things like talking therapies now more than instead of just saying, right, here's medication.
Yeah.
How about for your anxiety or your depression? Have you tried CBT or talking therapies or something like that? Yeah. So we're more open to that now, whereas before we weren't.
And do you think that people are open to that?
I think more so. I think the more we're offered, we weren't offered that before.
Yeah.
But we also have an expectation that we need something that's going to make us feel better right now.
Yes.
And the medication will do that quicker.
Because it's much more difficult then to enter into that process that you've actually got to do some hard work in order to improve or to move on.
And I was the same. Whenever I got sober, I thought, right, this is going to be super easy. And it's hard. Withdrawing from drugs and or alcohol is an awful experience. It's not pleasant and it's not fun. So you can understand why people don't stick it out.
Yeah, completely.
And you can make it, and there's ways to make it easier, and they do. There's medical detoxes and things like that. But it's uncomfortable, and nobody wants to have to sit in the discomfort. If you want to build a muscle, it's time under tension. So the longer the muscle is under tension, the muscle fibers tear, they recover, and you get stronger. So sitting in your discomfort is a bit like that. The only way for you to become emotionally strong and resilient is to actually sit in the discomfort. The longer you do that, the stronger you'll become. Then you'll be a bit more resilient and you'll be able to manage a lot of the things that life will throw at you. But you have to sit in it. There's no hiding. We still run online training sessions now, so our guys so they're getting six workouts a week plus two evening check-in sessions a week now since the COVID thing kind of kicked off. So they're actually doing more exercise now than they were before.
And tell me a bit about that combination between doing the physical and what that means or how that works.
So whenever I got sober and clean, a friend of mine took me to a running club. My background, I was never fit, so exercise was never a thing that I engaged in or went to a gym, and he took me to a running club. And I hated it. I did the first session and I threw up and said, I'm never going back. Hated it. But he came back 2 days later and took me back and we went back. And then I kept going back and I kept sticking at it. And the thing, the direct relationship that how I kind of put it together is I learned so much about myself through physical activity, because not only was it a way of helping me repair the damage that I'd physically done. At that time, running was my choice. I used to run for long periods of time. I was able to run and think and process and try and figure things out. But it was also, I decided to run marathons. And that's hard. And the training for that's hard. So what I try to tell people, if you actively engage in something that you know is going to be difficult and challenging, then you become resilient and you become a little bit more emotionally tougher. So you can directly relate that into life. Your recovery, for example, you can then you say, do you know what? I can go in there and I can do this really hard thing, and I didn't die, and I survived.
Yeah.
I can tackle something a bit harder out here.
Yeah.
And also, it's good for your head. I mean, like scientifically, it's good for your head. You know, it creates endorphins, the serotonin. It makes you feel better. Motion changes emotion. I always tell people, if you're having a bad day, go out for a walk, go out for a run. You'll always feel different at the end of it. You know?
Yeah.
So that's why I found it beneficial. And then I moved on from running marathons to strength training and things like that. And, you know, I just saw I saw how I grew as a person, literally through sport and exercise. Now, it doesn't fix all of your problems.
No.
And I never tell people that this is what's going to fix all of your problems. This is a fundamental piece of the recovery puzzle.
Do you find it's usually guys or girls, or is there a mixture?
The first trial group, I really struggled to get girls. And out of that first 6, there was only one female. And she was happy to participate, which was great. But ever since then, I've always made it, and I've made a point of having it 50-50. So it's always 50-50. To the point where I'll go that extra mile to try and get another female in.
Yes.
And that was because it's the whole stigma judgment thing. And again, research will show there's a correlation there between females coming forward and males. But in
what way? In what way?
Reluctance to come and open up and speak about the problem.
Oh, so research would say that women are less likely to do that.
Yeah. Because it ties into many other things. For example, if you're a parent, if you're a mother, and you have this problem, are you fit to be that? And all of these things, you know. So there seems to be a lot more pressure. I always try to keep the groups split 50-50, and they do. So it's not. So they train twice a week. At the basic level, I give them structure 2 days a week. We train at night time, because if you can get through a day and you haven't used, and then you come training and go home, there's a chance that's a full day you've gone and you haven't used alcohol or drugs.
Yeah.
But I've developed, there's a 6-week recovery program around that as well. So every week they'll get a particular content, and each day they'll get different parts of that content. You know, for example, week 1 might be around the cycle of change, and then week 2 might have been, I think it's like negative thinking patterns and distorted thinking, you know, and then living sober. So there has to be something ongoing as well.
Yes. And so whenever they finish that 6-week program, what happens then?
They've all stayed.
They stay.
So my goal was always to create, it wasn't just here's a 6-week program and go on. Community is really important.
Yeah.
And in my own recovery, being part of a community was essential.
Yes.
To help restore and build me up. So my goal was always to be able to create a safe environment, a safe community. So it's a sober active community. So the guys just come and they stay on. They come and they pay for their classes. They do 2 classes a week, if not more. And obviously, naturally, people have dropped off because of certain things. Addiction's a difficult thing.
Yeah.
But we regularly have, we have 21 currently at the moment.
Very good.
And that's what it's doing. So it's becoming self-sustaining. The recovery community is sustaining each other. If somebody is getting it really difficult, there's an online accountability group. They'll post it and they'll just be bombarded with support and encouragement. It's almost like if you go into this reluctant, you go into this afraid, you go into this anxious, and you don't only display your vulnerability. But if you're in a community of people that have the same or similar vulnerabilities, it becomes easier to open up. It becomes very accepting. So it's all the stigma, all the judgment, and there's no place there. And people can be themselves, and people can freely share if they're doing well. You know, I equally celebrated a guy today. He's just got a year under his belt. Where at the same time there could be somebody else really struggling. They'll both get the same attention and the same requirement.
Gaz, that is just amazing that you offer that. I mean, that is just incredible.
Thank you.
You know, honestly, I mean, it's just so. You're based in Derry, so is that sort of your catchment area, or would you get people from other areas?
Well, obviously, the majority of the guys are from here. Now, I had a lady that was travelling down from Ballymena to Derry. She completed the program. Again, that was 2 days a week as well, and we run community activities as well on a regular basis, and attending those. And what was good for that, I managed to get her plugged into a gym in Ballymena when she finished the 6 weeks, because it's a big commitment to come up and down. But the Zoom stuff now has been great because we've been able to reconnect, and she jumps in the classes. So it's really good.
What about in terms of families? I mean, there's such a knock-on effect, within families. Talk a little bit about that, even maybe in terms of your own family, or how things were and how they dealt with it, and how we can deal with it, or what, even if you're talking to somebody who's got someone within their family who is in addiction.
So I feel really sorry for families, because there's not a lot of specific family support. Some places try really hard. You have Al-Anon and Assert, some of the local services will do some family work, but up until recently there was very little.
Yeah.
My parents knew nothing about addiction. They knew nothing about physical dependence and changing of behaviour and what happens to someone when you try to withhold something that they need at the time. And it was a really steep learning curve for my parents. I was lucky enough to have parents that didn't give up when there was times where they were told that they should have.
Really?
I had police coming to my house. I was violent, and in hindsight, the person I was in the middle of my addiction is not the person that's having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
And I've had to come to terms with that and the stuff that has happened. But they had to deal with the chaos. Only about a year ago, I had this conversation with my dad, because I was speaking at a conference about families, believe it or not. And I had only taken those 8 years before I could talk to him about it. And he told me the most stressful part was whenever I went into recovery, because prior to that, they knew what they expect with my drinking and drug taking. They knew it was going to be chaotic, it was going to be troublesome, but they didn't know what was going to happen when I was sober. And I would never have thought of it that way. I had thought there was this big sigh of relief, and that was all rosy in the garden, but it wasn't.
And even when we think back to you in that place, what were there any thoughts in terms of what was happening with you and your family, or was there any, or was it just that the drink and drugs were the most important thing?
Like, I was dumped on them. Like, they had their life in Derry, I was living away, and then all of a sudden they had their physically dependent son landed at their house. And
what age would you have been then?
20, I think I was 28, 29. I went into treatment the first time when I was 29. No, I was 29 years old, but like mentally, probably not that at all. And I literally landed, and they got the brunt of it. They got the blame because they were the ones that were around. So clearly it was always their fault. They were my parents. It was their fault I was that way, because I couldn't accept that I failed a little bit.
Yes. So you blamed them. It
100%.
was you were saying. So you blamed them.
Yeah. And I had a really difficult period of time coming to terms with how hard I was on my father, for example, at the time, who gave me nothing but love my entire life. But because I needed to find the reason why this had happened, I was putting the blame on any negative thing that had ever maybe happened.
Oops.
It was very easy for me to say, I am this way because we never talked about things. Or I am this way because my mum was strict or not. You try and put the blame on people. And that's what I did. And it took me a while to come to terms with that. And I have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with my family right now.
So you were saying that they didn't give up when potentially they could have given up, or maybe would even have been advised to give up.
There was a local parish priest told them they threw me out at one point. I think my life would have looked very different if that had have happened. If at that point in time my parents had decided that they had had enough and that was it, we mightn't be having the conversation. And that's the reality of what possibly could have happened. But at the same time, you have people out there who are in despair, who are at their wits' end
I
because
know.
they just can't take it anymore. They have a loved one or a child that they just can't seem to get a hold on, and that must be a really, really hard place to be. Hey, it's a really complicated thing when it comes to families. I
Yeah.
only know my experience, but I also have been speaking with and work with other people who have had different experiences than that.
Yeah.
And I think it whittles down to hope. It always whittles down to hope. The hope that change is possible, and I think we have a duty of care to show. I feel that I have a duty of care to show people that hope is possible. It mightn't be as fast or as quick or as it mightn't be on your time frame.
Yeah.
Like if you're there to help, support, and love, and understand the addiction in the person, they understand
Yes.
that's the important part.
Yeah.
You've more of a chance to kind of maybe turn it around or maybe help them, guide them the right way. Before I was able to fully engage in the recovery process, whether that was the first time treatment, the second time, or the period after, honesty was really, really important. And like you can look at honesty from the person and for the person, and honesty for the people around them. I had to get honest with my shortcomings, deficits of character is what they'll call it in AA. I had to actually look at the areas of my life that were problematic, and be honest with that. And it's a hard, sore thing to do. It hurts. It hurts to look at your feelings.
Yes.
But until you're fully honest, one, that you have a problem, two, that you don't want to have it, and three, that the things that you're doing is they're causing it at the moment, you're not really going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And when you're in recovery, you need to be, that honesty needs to be even, your family and the people that are in this with you need to see that honesty. They need to know, because we're not mind readers. We don't know what people are going through. We don't know what somebody in recovery is going through. They don't talk to us about it.
And how did you come to that place of being honest? What was it that helped you do that?
For me, like, faith was a big part of my recovery as well. And I think with that came an inward look at myself and honesty and transparency. The people that are around at the time enabled me to be that, because it's a bit like the ARC community. If I was around people that I felt it was okay to be honest and vulnerable with, then I could do that.
Yes.
And that was important, to be around those types of people. And like, honesty is so important, because if you can't be honest with yourself, there's no chance you're going to stick at any kind of a change. It'll never stick.
And then that means you can't take responsibility. And if you constantly blame other people, and you're in the habit of that, that's hard to bring it back to yourself again. And maybe I'm the problem, or maybe it's something to do with me.
No, it's I remember saying that, maybe there comes a point when everybody else was right and I was wrong. Because for years everybody else was wrong because they didn't know, and then there's that little switch and you're like, maybe they're right, maybe there's something else going on here. More recently, one of the biggest drivers for me to really start thinking about interactions and communication and reactions was whenever I became a dad. So Zoe came along, lovely, wonderful, crazy bundle of joy that she is, and it really made me think about me. It made me think about, if I'm an anxious person, will that affect her? Will she pick up on that? Will she then become an anxious child? Or if dad's withdrawn or upset or quiet or tired, how will that affect? So it made me start to think about now how my interactions and behaviours were going to start impacting on other people.
Yeah.
And that was a big turning point for me, because there was so much, I felt responsibility in that, because before I was changing for me, and yes, I'm still changing for me, but now there's a different element.
Yeah.
I want to give Zoe the best opportunity possible. Now I'm going to fail in some areas. I'm not perfect, nobody is, but if I can make it the best possible by understanding me more, I think Zoe brought a softness that I wasn't expecting or thought that I had. And it broke down a lot of that. And again, what we touched on about, what I perceived I had to be like.
Yes.
And then Zoe came, and then it was almost like it was in there. It's like I refused to let it come out. And then Zoe came, and I realised that it was there all along,
I mean, that's amazing. And when you think, Gaz, where you have come from and where you are now, and that's not a massive period of time, really, but the change has happened.
Yeah. It's why I think of it. It's been 10 years, really. So I don't think I was a bad person. I maybe did things that I wasn't happy about, but ultimately I wasn't a bad spud, as they would say. But it's taken now, and I'm not there, but it's taken 10 years. There was 2 years of relapsing. There's been 8+ now of consistent sobriety. But I recognised at the start what needed to happen in order for me to get any way better on this road. I knew that I needed to work on self-esteem and self-worth and confidence. And I started doing that, and I became humble enough to be teachable. Yeah. And this is what I'll tell the guys that come in. You need to be able to drop any kind of ego or pride if you want to recover in this.
Yes. And
learn to accept not being told what to do, but be open to options and advice from people who have been there and done that.
I mean, what's your big vision?
My dream.
Your dream.
I think I would love to have a facility. I would love to have an ARC facility. So somewhere where we have a gym. So we have somewhere where we can provide the physical activity and things like that, but also where we have access to therapies, complementary therapies, but as well as room for workshops, for training, for family support. I would love a hub of some description. At the moment we have a gym. It's a studio gym. It can only hold so many. But I think this could be something much bigger.
Yeah.
And that's locally. So that's in Derry, and that's for the community. But at the minute, I'm working on, and we mentioned earlier, I'm currently working on an online learning platform, which means that when the content is ready, then it all goes on, and you can access that. So people on the course access it online, but also if you're in a different country, you can still do the program.
Yeah.
You can still do it wherever you are. It's a 6-week program. The content is the content, but the connection will be a little bit different.
That's it.
You'll still have the workouts, you'll still have online accountability, we'll still be able to use Zoom for that.
Okay.
But it's giving people a different approach to recovery. Okay. And I think that's what's the real, not selling point. I don't have to sell it because it's just different. I have people on the program that use AA and NA, Smart Recovery. Some people that don't want any of those, and I'm extremely open. I am not a competition for another recovery service. I am just a different option. I am just, because we're individual, things work for different people.
Absolutely.
And if it works and keeps you sober, excellent. If this plus AA works and keeps you sober, brilliant. I didn't need anybody to tell me how bad I already was, because I knew that. And I didn't need to feel less than I already was.
Yeah.
I needed to feel that there was hope and there was possibility, and that recovery was possible and forgiveness was possible.
Yeah.
And that's why this approach is different. People come to me and I know they've already, if they've come to me, they already have recognized that things are bad or they've done whatever. And I'm not here to judge, because if I was to do that, then I would be the hypocrite, because if I was to be judged on my past things that have happened in my life, so it's non-judgmental. I don't care about your past, I care about your future.
Yeah.
So what can I do to help you get to that? And that's where I stand. So it's very compassion-based, it's very strength-based in terms of, I'll find that thing that you can't see, I'll find that one good thing, and I'll feed it. And I'll make that the strength that we work on.
So if anybody wants to contact Gaz, please just go underneath the video in the description, and all his details will be there. Please do make contact with him. Also, you know, if you've got a family member, if you know someone who may have issues around substance abuse, do share the video with them. I mean, I just feel it would be so helpful. It's so good to hear somebody's story, someone who has been there, has faced the things that he needed to face, and then come out the other side. So thank you so much for taking the time out to watch. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you on the next video. So bye for now.